Twice the terror.
Welcome to Twice the Terror. My name is Ryan.
My name's Kat.
And we are your hosts. If you don't know this show, the way that it works is that each week we come up with a theme that involves the supernatural, the paranormal, horror themes, or just plain weirdness, and we each bring in a story or topic to discuss revolving around that theme. So this week we got a fun one. What is our theme this week, Kat?
We're doing our favorite haunted houses.
Yes, we are. Favorite haunted houses. I'll be honest, I might have bent the rules just slightly. I mean, there's no rules,
Okay.
but the term haunted house I used a little bit more obtusely, but we'll get there when we get there. So, haunted houses.
Okay.
What, out of curiosity, what made you pick this topic this week? What was
Okay. Well, okay. I love anything that's like old timey. It's just something about a different time. This is like before true crime really became a thing. And it's like a lot of these crimes that happened before we have modern policing and modern DNA testing, everything. A lot of these crimes go unsolved. So the crime that I have is actually one of the most infamous unsolved murders to have ever happened in American history. One that's like 100 years later still remains unsolved, and it haunts me at night. And the house is haunted at night and in the daytime, so it's rich. It's like so good to me.
I love it. Okay, well, why don't you jump? I know you're excited about your story,
Right,
so I'm
okay.
really curious. Why don't you jump into yours first?
All right, so the Iowa Touring Atlas called Villisca, one of the finest cities in the state. This little town has a population of barely 2,000 people, and it is like a blood red stain on the map of Iowa. So we're going back to June 9th of 1912. A local businessman by the name of Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children are returning home from a late night church function that Sarah actually programmed at their local church. There were 3 sons. It was Herman, Boyd, and Paul, and they had 1 daughter named Catherine. That evening, 2 of the children's friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were going to spend the night with the Moores. Very early the next morning on June 10th, their next door neighbor, Mary Peckham, was out doing laundry, and she begins to notice that the Moore house is particularly quiet for a house that has, 6 children inside of it. And their horses are beginning to get, restless, and the house is just eerily still. So she's beginning to think they're a little bit odd. This late in the morning, no one's out doing chores. And this is, obviously in the time when people were up at the crack of dawn, the call of the rooster. So she hears the horses going off, getting restless in the stable. So she decides to go up to the front door and, see if anyone is home. She knocks, no one answers. She tried the handle, the door is locked. All the curtains in the house are drawn shut and the windows are closed. So there's nary a peep from inside. Mary contacts Josiah's brother, Ross, hoping that he could get entry into the house to check on the Moores. Shortly after about 8:30 in the morning, Ross gets into the house, and the first thing he finds when he enters the downstairs bedroom are the Stillinger girls dead in their bed. The Villisca Review from Thursday, June 13th, 1912, the headline read, 8 people murdered in their beds in Villisca, their heads chopped open with an axe, a spectacle so repulsive that it was almost beyond comprehension that 6 more victims, murdered in identically the same fashion, lay in the 2 bedrooms upstairs. This is major news. I mean, this is a small town, and the crime scene literally became a circus. So it was said that roughly about 100 some people came down at the house, and they were quite literally touring through the house. So for anyone who's listening who is like a major true crime aficionado and you haven't heard of the Villisca axe murders, you are going to want to scream for this next part. While people are touring through the house and going through things, the bodies are still in the house, and the town marshal is actually letting people handle their murder weapon, which happened to be Josiah's own axe, which was found in the same room as the Stillinger sisters. So people are milling about the house, gawking at the bodies. Finally, the Villisca National Guard show up and secure the scene at noon. So here's what we know. Almost every victim was killed in their sleep. It's kind of terrifying to me on it, like on a personal level, because that just speaks to the level of like efficiency the killer had. I mean, to kill 8 people and no one wakes up except for one.
Well, and that's the weird thing about this story too, is the fact that like the attacks with the axe are so brutal, but there's no sign of like resistance or anything like that. It's like these people just let this killer cut their heads off, essentially. Like, not to be too morbid about it, but that's the way it's always been, is just like presented as like there was no attempt to fight back or anyone waking up or anything. It was how many bodies again were discovered?
8. There were 8 of them total,
8.
and the only one that had defensive wounds or showed any signs of having woken up was Lena Stillinger. So she must have woken up at some point, because she had a cut on her arm where she was trying to like block the axe. Mm-hmm. And each victim was killed with the pawl of the axe, or the butt of the axe, except for Sarah. Josiah's wife was the only one who was killed with the blade of the axe. And in the bedrooms, there are gashes in the ceilings from where the butt of the axe hit before he brought it down. So it's like he's actually hitting the ceiling with the amount of force that he's using, and then swinging it down, and like that no one moved except for Lena. So in the downstairs bedroom near the axe, the killer also left a 2-pound slab of raw bacon that he took out of their fridge. He wrapped it up in a dish towel and left it by the axe. I'm not really sure what that means. Like, some people have wondered if this is like an argument over livestock. Like, do pigs have anything to do with this? I mean, it's very bizarre.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would seem like a bizarre... It would almost make more sense in quotes, it would almost make more sense to the person to have cooked some of the bacon. You know what I mean? Like, done this weird deed and then was like, I'm hungry. What do we got? We got some bacon. But just to take it out and like leave it is so bizarre.
See, that's the thing, is the bloody footprints, they go into the kitchen where it shows that there were some leftovers on the table. So they think the killer did have a snack after killing them, smoked a couple cigarettes. And then it appears he went back upstairs to continue hitting Josiah with the axe a few more times. Like, he had the most damage out of all of the victims.
What was this after he was dead that the killer returned? Okay, like, so he
had a couple drags.
Yeah. And then had like some leftovers, like took some pot pie out of the fridge and ate it really quick or whatever. And then was like, yeah, I'm not done killing yet. And went back upstairs to attack an already dead body.
Yeah,
that is
like took a break, bizarre. Ripped a few darts, and was like, all right, back to...
Right.
So then the killer, he closes all the curtains. He covered the mirror in Josiah's bedroom with a sheet. So that is, again, is kind of strange to me, because this is like funeral practice back then, So I'm like, okay, he's like preparing the house for death, which is, again, this is all incredibly planned. He locked the front door, and he left with the keys. I'd like to point out quickly how he was following some like pretty standard practices of that era. Like, he had been planning this the entire time, and my theory is that he snuck into the house during the day and he hid in the attic, because there's a couple cigarettes that were found up in the attic. So he was up there all day waiting for the Moores to come home. He waited until after midnight, and then he snuck out to kill them. So whoever this was, there was like some deep-seated hate in the guy for this family. Like, yeah. And no one knows what the Moores could have possibly done. Like, they didn't seem like a family that was very particularly contentious in any way. There was some people wondered if he was doing this as a robbery, because Mr. Moore was it just says he was a business owner. Like, his money was still in his pocket. Like, his pants were draped over the end of the bed, so his money is still in his pocket. His keys, there were some checks in there. So like, if this was a robbery, what robber leaves without any jewelry or cash or keys to the businesses or anything? So like, this is like a personal thing. So small town, at one point in time or another, everyone becomes a suspect, and there were various legal proceedings. None of them led to any sort of conviction, and so the crime remains one of America's most infamous cold cases. Now, spooky business. So, without a doubt, the house is spectacularly haunted. The house was purchased sometime in the later aughts, I want to say like around 2009, by Darwin and Martha Lynn, who have since renovated the home, and it stands today a near exact replica to its 1912 state. You can visit the home for a daytime tour, or you can book an overnight stay. Needless to say, a lot of the overnight homies had some wild experiences. None more so than the employees, though. Johnny Hauser was a tour guide and a caretaker, and he has heard and seen some, like, beyond the pale activity. Johnny had a story that was posted in the Daily Iowan, where he talks about being alone in the house, and this is a quote from the article. It said, "While cleaning one day, the guide heard someone walk upstairs and shut a dresser door. Thinking someone had broken in, he walked up the stairs to confront what he believed to be a trespasser. So I go up to kick this guy out. Nobody's up there," he said. "I talked to my buddies afterwards, and they're all saying, 'Oh, houses make noise.' Like, I'm fully aware of what a footstep is at this point in my life. I'm not a complete idiot." So that's what kind of got me started staying the night. Johnny is said to have spent something over 400 nights in the house. He's heard voices, chairs rocking back and forth, furniture moving. Unfortunately, he has yet to have seen a ghost. At least not since, when this article was posted by the Daily Iowan back in 2020. I'm not sure how you feel about EVPs.
I'm depending on the technology used, I'm a big proponent of EVPs. Okay. I think that it's one of the better sources of kind of catching some sort of, voice or supernatural phenomena out there compared to a lot of stuff that they have now. So EVPs and spirit boxes, personally, I'm sorry, this is just a personal thing. I don't really like spirit boxes. I just don't think they're super accurate or anything like that. I mean, how accuracy can be weighed in this sense, but BuzzFeed Unsolved, which I love BuzzFeed Unsolved. They are great. BuzzFeed
journalistic integrity. I love, they got a lot of spirit box activity while they were in the house. They got some quotes, things like, "I'm in here, I'm miserable, I'll kill him, stop me, and help me." Kindred spirits from the Travel Channel picked up an EVP of a spirit saying, "I killed them," after it was asked if it had done something to the family. A medium came to the house, and they said that the main spirit, the most present one, was most certainly the killer. They said the spirit was, quote, "giddy" about what they were going to do, and that they could sense this person liked very weak, malleable people, quite literally like putty in his hands. Visitors have said that the downstairs bedroom where the Stillinger sisters died has an extremely caustic energy to it. It has a tendency to just drive people into arguments, and it sounds like people would fight in that room, and then the group would begin to separate into various groups. And what I think is happening is that this entity, this spirit, is trying to work out the weaker ones, get the friends, get the Scooby gang to separate so he can get, Daphne alone and kidnap her, kind of a thing. I'm making it sound really flippant, but
I mean, that's an episode of Scooby-Doo I'd want to see, though.
Yeah.
I want to I want to see the gang investigating axe murder house.
One guest did a little flashlight experiment in that room, and in there they asked the spirit to turn the light on and off. So BuzzFeed did a little recreation of that same test, and the lights were turning on and off. Admittedly, the ghost was getting a little confused as to which light specifically that they wanted turned off, because they did have two lights. But I mean, come on, give this ghost a break. It probably sees in black and white. This is so old of a crime.
That's exactly. That's how old-timey eyeballs worked. They saw.
Yeah, they were like, "Turn off the blue flashlight," and the ghost is like, "What's blue?" Because I think everything prior to.
Yeah, of course. Everything prior to Technicolor was in black and we all know this. All right.
America was in black and white.
America was in black and white. There was no color. It was. In case anyone is wondering, we're being sarcastic. That's not true. I just want to make that clear.
Sometimes I like to go up to finance bros and ask them, why can't we just print more money just to feel something? It's the same energy. The debt ceiling, just build a taller building. I'm a menace.
Oh, good lord.
Okay, so okay, ghosts.
Yeah, what's the show about again?
So yeah, Adam Berry from Kindred Spirits said he would never go in the house alone and provoke because there is something in there and it is not playing. He said, quote, "The weaker you are as an individual going into that house, the more vulnerable you are and the more activity you get." So I think the killer is working people's emotions in the Stillager room, trying to weed them out, get to the weakest of the group and target them. In November of 2014, a guy came to spend the night in the house. So this is a middle-aged guy, somewhere around his in his 50s, with his elderly parents. He was wearing camo, and he happened to have a hunting knife attached to his belt, and that's not really too strange, for Midwestern states.
Yeah.
The guy made some sort of comment to the effect of wanting to provoke the house, and Johnny is like, all right, good luck with that. So he got them all checked in and he went home. A few hours later, the son is found lying on the floor of the Stillinger room with his hunting knife sticking out of his chest. And honestly, this is the part that really kind of scared me too. So it turns out the guy actually was in the house alone. And he said that one minute he's provoking the ghost, the next he's in an emergency room in Omaha, Nebraska. He was life-flighted after they found him. So I just want to say very quickly that I am very happy that this individual survived, because I cannot imagine what it must have been like, not just in the moments leading up to that, but everything that has happened to this guy afterwards. Because, when you're the person who was horribly injured in a famous haunted house, like I can't imagine that comes.
Well, in all seriousness, like something that I am a firm believer of. Look, people listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, whatever your platform is, if you believe in ghosts, great. If you don't believe in ghosts, that's fine. If you're a skeptic or if you're somewhere in the middle, that's all good. One thing I always ask people, if you're going to investigate, don't provoke ghosts. And even if you don't believe in ghosts, imagine if you were living in your house and somebody just kicked open the door and was like, "Hey, buddy, hey, why don't you get on up out of here?" Things like that. Like, you just imagine if somebody came in your house and just started screaming at you. Like, that's not cool.
And someone's like, "Oh, look at Greg. Greg doesn't have a corporeal form."
Yeah. Greg, look at him sitting there on his couch. Greg has Cheeto stains. Greg. Like, if somebody did that to you, Greg, you wouldn't be happy. So don't do it to ghosts, all right? Whether you believe in them or not, if they are real, just assume that they might be. Don't go in there and be like, "Ooh, look at you, you're a ghost." Because, you don't want somebody else doing that to you. Or, on the high end of scales, you end up like this guy with a hunting knife sticking out of your chest. So, that's bad. I mean, that's all bad.
For me personally, I personally don't think that a ghost stabbed this man, but I do think that some places do have a serious effect on people in an emotional way. So, a quick note to all our true crime friendos, take a mental health break sometimes, So, ever since that incident happened in 2014, Johnny hasn't spent a night in the Villisca Axe murder house. From an article Johnny did with Vice back in 2021, it sounds like Martha Lynn actually wanted to close the house to the public for good after that incident. But Johnny said, and I think he made a very good point about this, is that that's just going to lead to people breaking in. Because the more you tell people they can't have something, the more they want it, and that would just add on to the infamy and the taboo to the place. So it's literally going to draw energy to it. So it's like the Streisand effect. That's what like a spooky...
The Streisand effect?
Yeah, it's like Barbra Streisand had an unflattering photo taken of her in a bikini, and she wanted it expunged from the media, but her attempts to do that just made it more famous. Everyone ended up seeing it. So that would all make sense. I was trying to connect Barbra Streisand to ghosts, and I was very confused. I was like, I think she's still alive. You're like, I don't remember that part in Funny Girl. I'm really in the weeds about this.
Although if Barbra Streisand had a ghost hunting show,
I would watch that. Kesha has one.
Yeah, Kesha does have one, and you know what? It's not half bad. I got to give it to Kesha. I know she's waking up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy, but then later on she's hunting ghosts. So
Johnny really wants to keep this house going, and he wants to do that in a very respectful manner. He doesn't want this to be like a sideshow attraction in any kind of way, and I think that's I truly admire that. I don't, and to be quite frank, I don't think anyone should treat any location like this like that. Like, you're not going to the circus to see the clowns.
Yeah, agreed.
There's a very human tendency to be drawn to death. Honestly, I believe it's good and healthy for us to look and inspect this darker side of life, but what must come first and foremost to our exploration of what people might call the dark and macabre is, a respect for humanity. So
yes,
if you
agreed.
go to visit the Villisca Axe murder house, as I say, all I can really ask is that, you just go there with a sense of reverence and kindness, not just for the people whose lives ended there, but also for the people who work there. Don't disrespect the space. The Lynn family is so kind as to let you spend the night there, and also like they encourage people to go ghost hunting. Just be safe and be respectful.
Yeah, maybe bring a little something for them.
Yeah.
Little trinket.
They bring toys for the children. Like, the house is
That's
full of
sweet.
like teddy bears and stuffies, and it's really sad, but also like kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Most of the guests that they say are women, like elderly women who love true crime and younger women who love ghost hunting, and it's just all my spooky girlies out there.
That's awesome. Well, I cannot compete with that story. My story, okay. I'm just gonna say it. My story is as I said, I bent the rules a little bit. All right.
Okay.
So my haunted house, in quotes, is interesting because it can be in multiple places at the same time. And it's also more of a mansion. In fact, it's a haunted mansion.
Oh my god.
Shall we say?
I don't know if I'm angrier at you because I'm not angry.
Okay, yes, all right. Technically,
allow it.
I am going to talk about Disney. Okay, I'm going to be a nerd here, all right? I am, besides being a horror movie fan and a fan of the supernatural and the paranormal and the weird, I also am a big fan of Disney parks. Not
You're
going
a
to lie.
Disney adult.
I am a Disney adult. I'm going to wear that badge proudly.
I love it.
But here's the thing. The reason I chose this is not because I wanted to talk about an attraction, at a Disney park, but there are actually a lot of really interesting ghost stories about it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I picked it. I was like, and of course, take all these with a grain of salt. You can't prove any of this. There's no like history to it in the same way that like the your story has like a true crime element to it, but these stories are all really fun, and I think it just adds an extra layer if you do like to visit Disney parks, that if you're like us and you like the weird and you like the supernatural, you can take a little bit of extra there with you. So of course there are technically like 5 versions of the Haunted Mansion. There's the original in California, there's the second one in Florida, and then there's also Phantom Manor in Paris, there's Mystic Manor in Hong Kong, and there is a version in Tokyo Disneyland, which is just like the Florida version, basically.
Okay.
And a little bit of a brief history for anybody who doesn't know. The ride was developed for years by Walt Disney and his Imagineers and everything. Originally, they built it for the Disneyland park in Anaheim, California. They completed the facade of the building, which is kind of like an old Southern, architecture. It's in New Orleans Square is the land there. So it kind of has that old, New Orleans style. Have you been to Disneyland or Disney World?
No, so I'm
or
very
anything?
invested in this. I'm broke, so like.
I mean, me too.
It's a side tangent, but I think it's really funny. I did get to go to a Disney park once. I got to go to the Animal Kingdom in Orlando, Florida, because my best friend won tickets through the Pittsburgh Pirates to go on a big vacation to Orlando to see Universal and one of the Disney parks. So I don't care how bad the Pittsburgh Pirates are. I am forever a stan of them because they paid for 5 days and 4 nights, all expenses, so I could go to these parks. But also, Animal Kingdom was hell on earth, and I would never do it again.
Okay, I gotta. Okay, forget my story for a second. I gotta hear this story. Why was Animal Kingdom hell on earth?
Because it's all kids. A lot of parents take the little kids to the safari, to the Animal Kingdom one, because there's less rides and it's mostly animal stuff and it's a little bit more engaging for them. But that was the one we decided we wanted to go to because I like animals. And I was like, it'll be fun. And then we got there and then we were just in a sea of strollers and I'm like, this is not fun.
What time of year did you go?
Oh, it was like March. It was like...
Oh, that'll do it. Like
Yeah.
spring break. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's when all the parents are like, get the kids on the plane. We're going to the Disney's Animal Kingdom or whatever. You know, I don't know why they all sound like they're from Brooklyn, but that's apparently what I assume all parents sound like now at this point.
When you reach a level of tired, you just become Bernie Sanders.
It's true. It's true. I mean, look, I've got the glasses already, the receding hair. I'm halfway there. The burnification has started already, you know. Soon I'm just gonna be wearing mittens all the time, and so this right here is actually it's a little technically it's a ornament of a recreation of the this is the Florida Haunted Mansion. It's much more in like it's very cute. We got it. My wife and I got it when we got married, or when we got. It was kind of like a gift for being engaged from some of our friends who work at the Disney parks. But so that's the Florida location. Okay. The California location, like I said, has a much more like southern kind of like old building style to it. It's in the land it's in is in New Orleans Square. In Florida, they don't have that land. They have Liberty Square, which is more like colonial America, which is why the house looks like that. They styled it differently. But the rides are very similar inside, minus a couple scenes and a few different changes. But the original ride was, the facade was completed in 1963, but the ride itself didn't open until 1969. And of course, when you do something like that and it's a haunted mansion, you start rumor mills immediately. You know, there were rumors for years that they took on like private tours, you know, or like specialty groups, and a woman went on and it was so terrifying that she died of a heart attack, you know, not true. Walt Disney started having his Imagineers work on the 1964-1965 World's Fair, so that took away time from developing the Haunted Mansion, and then Walt Disney died in 1966. So it kind of left his Imagineers, the people who design the rides and build the rides, trying to figure out what to do with the attraction. And so for years it kind of like lived in this limbo of what do we do? You know, they had advanced some technology. There's a lot of like kind of arguments that happened. The most famous is Mark Davis and Claude Coates, who were two designers for the mansion, wanted two different tones. One of them wanted to be really scary. That was Coates, and Davis wanted it to be funny.
Okay.
And so they split it down the middle. So if you ever go on the ride, the first half's like really scary, but it's more in tone with like an actual like scary haunted house.
Scary for Disney.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the opening scene has a guy hanging from a ceiling, so you know it's pretty, pretty dark.
I was not expecting that.
No, seriously. Like, again, for anybody who's never been on the Haunted Mansion, it opens with a room that stretches. It's the portrait room, and you hear narration by Paul Frees, who is the voice of Tony the Tiger. But he's got this very deep voice, and it's perfect for the Haunted Mansion. Yeah, it opens with lightning crashing after there's a narration, and if you look up into the rafters, there's a body hanging up in there because the ghost host essentially hung himself in the story. Disney, woo, fun, you know. Disney would never do that on an attraction today, but in 1969, it was all totally fine. But anyway, the second half of the attraction is much more fun and friendly, and there's ghosts in the graveyard, and they're all singing a song, and it's all great, and it's fun. So eventually that version opened in 1969, and while this was going on, they were constructing the Florida one as well. They were building Magic Kingdom Disney World, essentially. And they were doing doubles of all the props and all the animatronics. And that version that I just showed you, the one in Florida, opened in 1971, so only a few years later. And it's one of the most popular attractions in the park, of course. Myself, it is probably my favorite attraction, clearly. because of this, and because of the tone, and because of all the weirdness, there's actually a lot of stories of real hauntings from the ride and the park itself. Now, I didn't talk about any of the park ones because I thought that might be a fun, different topic to talk about, like haunted theme parks and stuff. But the ride itself, there's a ton. Like I said, take all these with a grain of salt. Some of these are legends, but a lot of them actually come from cast members, which are they call the people that work the rides cast members at Disney. So a lot of them come from word of mouth from people that worked at the parks. And a lot of these stories, I'll link the websites in the show notes. The first one dates back actually to the construction. The story involves a sound designer who was working on the ride. They have this room in the ride called the Seance Room. And the Seance Room is this room with Madame Leota, who's like a fortune teller, like oracle person. Her head is in a glass ball. And so it's just her head in this glass ball in the center of the room with like instruments and stuff floating around you. And she's kind of like conducting a seance. Well, supposedly there was a sound designer who was working on this room, and he kept hearing weird noises and talking and sounds coming from the room, and he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And he kept looking around. He was thinking like it was like an employee had left a radio in there or something. But apparently it never took breaks. Like you never heard a commercial break or it never turned off. It was just constant chattering, and he couldn't find it. And this went on for the entire time he was constructing it. Finally, though, apparently he just gave up on it. It couldn't find it. So he put a speaker where the sound was coming from to play the audio from the ride to cover the sound. And what's weird about this, because you think, okay, it's a fun, like, little urban legend. But what's weird about this is the Florida version actually has a story from a cast member that kind of corresponds with this. There was a cast member. His name was Jay Lacano, I believe is how you would pronounce it. He was working the closing shift on the Haunted Mansion, Magic Kingdom one night, and he was doing a walkthrough. So after the rides close, they have people go through, make sure there's no trash, nobody's hiding on the ride, anything like that. So him and another cast member were doing a walking. And they were getting closer to the seance room, and his fellow cast member stopped him and goes, "Do you hear that?" And he goes, Jay goes, "I don't hear anything." And he goes, No, listen. And so he starts listening, and they start hearing noises coming from the seance room. And mind you, at this point, all the work lights are on, the audio is off, it's all shut down.
All the mystery is gone. Like, it's just like you're walking through.
It's just a ride, at that point. They know how the animatronics work and how the ride works and everything. So for them, it's just like, okay, we're seeing everything. Well, they get to the seance room, and all the lights are off. So there's no work lights on. All the lights are off. And they start to hear the sound of a beating drum. And as they are going through the room, it gets louder and louder and louder. And finally, they're like, all right, we're done with this. They leave the room, and it stops.
Of course.
Like that.
Of course. Oh, my God. There's so many elements to this that are just making me go like, girl.
Right? It's weird because you think, oh, it's Disney. Mickey, I want to go meet Mickey Mouse. I want to get an ice cream. I want to go on the rides. Like that's what everybody's thinking. And but then you hear all this like crazy stuff, and you're like, maybe there's something more to it, and it makes sense. I mean, look, if you're a fan of Disney or you have fond memories of that, or why not? If you pass on, maybe that's where you go. Like, you know what I mean? Probably the most famous story is of it kind of varies in terms of like why the mom is there, but it's a story of a mother who is there at the ride with her son's ashes, because apparently he died and was cremated and wanted his ashes spread on the ride. Well, I've heard versions of the story where she snuck it in. I've heard versions where she asked the company to do it and they said no. But whatever the outcome of the story is, the mom spreads her ashes on the Haunted Mansion. And the ghost of the child is supposedly seen there now. He seemed to be hanging out at the exit. I believe this is in the California one, but I have heard it from the Florida one. But supposedly he hangs out by the exit and is sitting there crying in the exit of the ride looking for his mom. Which, I really want to be an urban legend, partially because it's so sad,
Yeah.
but also because there's a lot of things that can like point to this being not real. There's like no way to to solidify this as a real story. But also like a lot of people are like, oh, I walked through the exit and I felt cold spots, and but it's like, yeah, it's because the ride's air conditioned. Like, there's probably just cold spots because it's California or Florida and it's hot.
Yeah.
And but what's interesting about this is that what makes this so kind of grounded in reality is people do try to spread ashes at the Haunted Mansion. Like, this is something that happens a lot.
That's what I heard.
Apparently, like, people think, oh, it happens to everyone. Apparently, it happens more than we know and more than we think. But look, I'm going to say this right now. If anybody's thinking about doing that, don't do it for a couple reasons. One, come on, health, safety, like, that's, don't do that. But number two, your loved one, grandma, you're bringing grandma's ashes. She's not going to become one with the dust of the Haunted Mansion. She's going to get sucked up into a Hoover. Because what happens is Disney has a special, they call it, I think it's HEPA. I don't think it's HIPAA because HIPAA's a different thing, but HEPA cleanup is what they say, like over the walkie-talkies. And what that basically means is somebody's dumping ashes on the ride. They'll shut down the ride. Yeah. They get a hazmat team to come in with a vacuum, and they just suck up all the ashes. So unless you really want your like loved one to live in like a garbage, vacuum garbage bag for the rest of their life, don't do that. Please don't dump ashes at the Haunted Mansion or any Disney ride for that, or any theme park for that matter, because it's not going to end up the way you want it to.
No. Again, another side tangent, but my dad's one of his favorite movies is The Big Lebowski. And he wants his funeral for us to take him to the California coast in a Folgers can. And he's like, I want my ashes to go in your eyes. And I'm like, Dad.
Good night, sweet prince, with the Folgers can. Yes, that's essentially what you're doing. You're pulling, you are Walter in that moment on the Haunted Mansion. You're just like kissing the Folgers can, opening it up, dumping and it's getting all over everybody.
Some poor woman from Nebraska is getting a face full of Meemaw. Just like, really?
Right. Little Johnny, who's like, I want to go to Disney. And, they finally save up for years to bring him. Yeah. And then all you're doing is just like, here's a face full of Grandpa. Aunt. Yeah, exactly.
Pocket sand.
Don't do that. Yeah, no, seriously. Ashes sand. Pocket ashes. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that to people.
It's not nice.
Now, that's actually not the only ghost scene at the Haunted Mansion. Again, in the California mansion at the exit, there's a former cast member named Mike A. is how he's credited on the website. They didn't give his last name. Apparently, he worked there from 2002 to 2004 as a custodial cast member, so a janitor. And he's cleaning up the trash near the Haunted Mansion one night. And he sees that there's a woman sitting in an antique wheelchair in an employee-only hallway by the trash can. So he goes by the exit, and then there's like an employee-only hallway, and he goes in there, and there's this woman sitting there, this old antique, wheelchair. And he takes a moment, and he turns around to go look at her, and she's gone. And so he kind of thinks, well, that was weird, but, there's a lot of things. What is this wheelchair style? Like, we don't have that at the park, and also at the same time, like, where'd this woman go? Why is she an employee? But he kind of brushes it off because he thinks he's just like, well, maybe it was somebody back there another employee brought them back for some reason or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Until a few months later, and he's speaking with another cast member. They were talking about the supernatural, and without telling her his story, this other cast member says that, one night I was cleaning up the Haunted Mansion elevators, and I see this woman sitting in an old antique wheelchair there. And like 5 seconds later, she said she went to go speak to her and she was gone. So immediately this guy was like, I don't know if I believe in the supernatural, but it's a weird coincidence that this woman has shown up twice. Besides the child, the second most famous ghost story, or I guess the second most famous ghost that people see there, this one's often reported at Florida, but I have seen some cases where it's unclear if it's at Anaheim, but mostly I've seen this set at Florida. And that is the man with the cane. So what happens is at night, oftentimes employees will be locking up the Haunted Mansion. And, you know, they're watching, they're kind of closing things down. And the Haunted Mansion has this ride, moving kind of ride seat called doom buggies. They kind of look like little coffin things, and you ride in them. And they kind of go on a conveyor belt, essentially take you through the ride. And so the employees are watching this, and oftentimes at night, they'll see this man sitting in a doom buggy just with a cane. He's just sitting there, like staring, and he's very gaunt looking, apparently. They will try to engage him, and they're like, excuse me, sir, the ride's closed or whatever. And he won't say anything. Just won't engage them, and he just keeps riding. And so it's often the people towards the front of the ride, when you kind of load in, they'll tell people like, hey, keep an eye out. There's this guy riding around, by himself. Watch for him on the exit. And the guy never shows up at the exit. And apparently this has been seen a couple times. There's a lot of people that, for some reason, they speculate that it's a pilot who crashed into Bay Lake, which is like a lake that was on the property before Disney World was built in the 1940s. But when I did research, when I Googled it, I couldn't find any like immediate records to any plane crashes there. So kind of like an odd, like, well, maybe not. Other people say that it's actually this guy who told this version of the story named Michael Jamis said that he was always told it was the ghost of Yale Gracie, who was another famous Imagineer who worked on the ride. Oh. And there's actually a tombstone in the ride named after him. They all kind of put their names on them, and so there's a Master Gracie. If you've ever, people out there who know the like made up lore of the Haunted Mansion, that's not really there, but fans kind of took it on themselves. It's the story of Master Gracie, and so people use that as the name. It just kind of stuck, and so people kind of like speculate, like, did this get willed into existence? Is it Yale Gracie and he's showing up on the ride now because people are invoking Master Gracie into the ride and stuff? It's kind of weird. Probably nothing more chilling though than the Tuxedo Man. So the Cane Man upsets people, but the Tuxedo Man is probably the most chilling.
Okay, I'm excited.
Reportedly, at the end of the ride, they have like one of those mirrors, like round ones that you can like look into, when you're like at a shop or something. They hang on the wall so you can see behind you and get a wide view. They have one of those on the speed ramp as you're exiting, and cast members use it to watch the speed ramp to make sure there's no other employees coming up or anything like that to, switch shifts. Yeah. So one night, this has happened a couple times, but the one I found was a story of a cast member. She's working, and she looks in the mirror and sees a guy kind of coming up the speed ramp. So she thinks it's one of the other cast members, like switching shifts with her. She looks around and there's nobody back there. And so she just kind of goes on about it. Okay, well, that was weird. I saw something. She looks again and sees him again. And he's not there when she turns around again. So finally, she's starting to get a little worried, and he's getting clearer, and he's dressed in a tuxedo. So it's not exactly what they wear. They kind of wear a version of like a dapper suit.
Yeah, I've heard it's like a vest and a bow tie kind of thing. Yeah.
So similar, but not exact what they would wear. And so she's kind of there working on the ride again by herself, and all of a sudden she feels a cold hand grip her shoulder. She looks in the mirror and sees the tuxedo guy, turns around, and there's nobody there.
No,
and apparently she was like, I'm done. Like, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. She left the ride that night. Understandably so.
Listen, I don't want living men touching me. I don't want dead men touching me.
Yeah, no, that's a whole lot of nope. It's just a whole lot of nope there. But the interesting thing, a lot of these stories involve one person, you see a ghost. Okay. Well, apparently there's a story that was submitted by a woman named Jacqueline. And she claims that her and her mom wanted to be the last people to go on the ride on the Haunted Mansion. So they got in line. This is in California. They got on the line, and they were the last group that they let in, because they let in like a big group, and then you kind of separate into ride vehicles after like the opening show. Mm-hmm. And they let in a big group. There's a hallway you have to walk down to get to the doom buggies. And they let the group go on ahead, so they were the last ones. They're like, we want a little bit of space so we can just enjoy the ride by ourselves. Right. So they waited. Nobody came from behind them. Everybody ahead of them was gone. They're like, great. They went in. Cast member got them on the doom buggies. They were riding, and there were no other doom buggies around them with people in it. And the mom and Jacqueline were just kind of like, okay, great. This is awesome. Till they got to the seance room. Again, the seance room, which is bizarre that there's so much going on with here. A lot of people actually speculate that the seances written on, like, the different things written on Madame Leota's book in the room might be real. And so it's something they put on and they were just like, it's fine. And so maybe it's something real, and that's why there's bizarre stuff happening in this room.
Disney was like, get as accurate as possible, and then this happens. They're like, too accurate.
It was the 60s. They were just like, whatever, doesn't matter. OSHA doesn't exist. Just what doesn't, safety doesn't matter. Like, just put it together. So somebody probably found some weird book and just threw it on there. They're like, looks great.
I want to know what OSHA's rules are for summoning demons and spirits. Like,
they've got to have one, right? I'm sure it's like
one.
you need guardrails and don't summon, evil, creepy entities or whatever. Yeah. But so anyway, they get to the seance room, and the seance room is kind of like a half circle. You kind of like go in a circle as you're going around it to see Madame Leota in the center. Mm-hmm. And they look around, and suddenly they see all kinds of people in these other doom buggies. There's men, there's women, there's children, there's all these people there. Okay. And they're immediately just like, oh, I guess they let on a second group and we just didn't see it. So they go through the rest of the ride, and they're going and enjoying and stuff. They get to the end. This is the one point that I find a little odd, is that they said at the end that there wasn't a cast member. You kind of get off the doom buggy and you go up this little escalator and it takes you off the ride. Normally there's a cast member there to kind of let people out so nobody falls. So it seems, I'm not saying it couldn't have happened, but it seems weird that they wouldn't have somebody there till closing.
Yeah.
But apparently what these people said is there was nobody there. So they kind of hung out for a minute or two to kind of enjoy the ambiance before they left the final exit area. And nobody else got off the doom buggies. Every doom buggy that came out after them was completely empty.
Well.
So, again, I bent the rules a little bit. It's not technically a house you can live in. But that said, it may not be a house we as living people can live in. But it seems like a lot of the undead or the deceased have decided to make it a permanent home for themselves.
It is a house shape. It has ghosts. I'll take it. My only question is, what Disney character would you be?
What Disney character would I be?
Yeah.
Like if I was a walk around character?
Any character, a walk around character. If you're a character in a movie, like who are you in the Disney world?
I mean, I love Oogie Boogie from Nightmare Before Christmas. That's a good one. Yeah, Oogie. I mean, but in reality, I'm probably Rick Moranis and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I don't know.
Well, that's good. No, that's good. I get asked this question all the time at work because, everyone I work with is a Disney adult, and I have my answer canned and ready. So they're like, if you were a Disney character, who would you be? And I'm like, Miko from Pocahontas, the hungry raccoon. That's
a good one. That's a good one. Maybe I'm the pug. What's the pug's name in that movie?
Yeah. What is the pug's name? Percy.
That's it. Yep.
Percy the pug.
Yep, I could see that. I was trying to think. I was like, what's an obscure Disney movie? Let's be honest. I'd probably be like Mr. Shmee. I'd probably be like, yes, Captain. That'd probably be me in reality. I want to think I'm some cool Disney villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what I want to be. But in reality, I'm a pug or like a really dopey pirate.
I know myself. Like, I want to be Maleficent, but I know deep down that I'm just a hungry raccoon.
But exactly. I just know I don't have the dance moves to be in High School Musical. I can't dance.
I've seen their dance moves. It does not require a lot.
Look, I gotta get my head in the game, or however the lyrics to that go. On that note,
together. Oh my God.
We have slowly gone crazy this episode. It's episode 2, and we've slowly descended into madness. If you like us, please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see more. Follow us on the audio platform. Whatever you listen to or watch this on, thanks for watching. We appreciate it.
We do, yeah.
But I think it's time to wrap this up. So, Kat, would you like to close us out?
On behalf of the Tuxedo Man and the Man with the Cane and everyone that has been found on the Haunted Mansion ride, Florida or California or otherwise, as well as those within the Villisca Axe Murder House, we thank you so much for listening to our podcast this evening.
Until next time, everyone.
Till next time.